light, our own candle, our own talents that we have to invest. Each of us is gifted with creation and the capacity for transformation. So, truth I found attending the global climate summits. Number one, what we do and don't do in the US matters a ton. It's really surprising. I mean, we're one of 194 nations, but what we do matters a lot. Number two, America is not able to make up its mind. I had a number of people walk up to me and say, you're schizophrenic. You commit on the one hand and you make promises and then you don't follow through, and then you commit again and then you don't follow through. And so we've got a reputation for having unreliability. We do not follow through on our promises. Now, we've followed through on some, we've done some good things. Number three, looking at this wall, Mother Clayola's wonderful suggestion about putting names. Those are the people, the children and the youth are paying the highest price. So I've had the privilege of talking with youth from all over the world who are saying, I have no future. What am I living for? How am I going to have anything close to what my parents had? Can I have children? Is it really possible? So there's a huge anxiety and a huge determination and a huge anger. In many ways, youth are a little bit like the landowner with the talents being angry at, well, why aren't the adults being adults? Why is it being pawned off onto us? I mean, Obama gave a beautiful speech about how important it was for youth to act, and the youth in the background, many of them were seething, saying, yeah, we're acting, but where are you? Why are you undercutting things? Why can't you come to some sort of agreement? Why can't you come together? Number four, youth want elders. They want you to stand up and help them. You don't have to go to Geneva or somewhere else. It's standing up here. They want you to stand with them publicly. They want you to help however you can. It doesn't have to be in a big way, but simply to be public and say, I'm with you. And you can be with them here. Five, Indigenous and faith values are mattering more and more and more because all of the business values, the ethical values, the Aristotelian values are failing. And so they're looking to religious values. So consequently, our very faith is becoming increasingly central to the global climate change possibility of getting things figured out. Some of our basic values are becoming more and more important. So I don't want to diss my own country by saying we're totally bad, because we're sort of schizophrenic. We do some really great stuff and then we do some not so good stuff. So we did the IRA and we've done great stuff on solar and wind and that sort of things. But as a nation, we don't have the basic laws that passed in Europe 15 years ago because we're so balkanized. We have so many angry people on this side and so many angry people on that side. And there's some movement among some youth and some communities that are getting out with elder support, and they're saying, darn it, right-wing and left-wing people, quit scream at each other, quit escalating, behave like adults. Let's address what we need here. Let's be honest that we're in an emergency. Let's all declare it. Let's make it something that is not allied to any party, that it transcends every party. So within the scientific community, way back 55 years ago, there was a recognition of this truth. Dr. Lynn White said, more science and more technology are not going to get us out of the present ecological crisis until we find a new religion and rethink our old one. 56 years ago, that message was said. Pope Francis reiterated it on October 4th in one of his latest pronouncements, and he said, we must move beyond the mentality of appearing to be concerned, but not having the courage needed to produce substantial changes. That courage word. Courage is central to Christianity, central to creation, and central to the transformation that our faith creates within us and can create between us. Francis ends saying, to suppose that all problems of the future can be solved by new technical interventions is a form of homicidal pragmatism. So there's a huge propaganda machine going globally to try to divert us from dealing with climate change. There's major international engineering companies that are quietly wishing to profit from it. The worse it gets, the more they have to rebuild. So there's the Golden Calf Society, I tend to call them, all the big corporations that are trying to profit off it, are busy trying to push back, saying, oh, just invest in technology, invest in the yet to be invented. But the true solution's here within each of us, within our hearts, within our values, and within the faith we hold. So what truths might we belong to? So I'll start with the geophysical truth. What you all know, we have to dramatically reduce fossil fuel use now, or we'll face rather soon conditions we cannot adapt to. And by rather soon, I'm meaning by 2030, if not sooner. The good news on that is if we do something, every little thing we do gives us a little more time. So everything we manage to do makes a difference. Second, we can do this. There's a huge international marketing of discouragement, that it's too late, that it's too big, and that we're all too little. But think World War II, right here, the building of Fort Casey, the building of all those armaments. It took a community that was a logging community with a variety of other important activities, and this area was galvanized by World War II. People talked about the war. We rationed our gasoline. We rationed all of our supplies. Everyone cut back, came together for the cause. So did we have the capacity? We quadrupled our capacity to produce ships. So we have it in our bones to do this. The issue is, how do we get out of our silos and come together as a community to act upon it? On the dark side, moving back to some of the scripture cited, we're the largest petroleum producer in the world now. We're going backwards, and we're set to double our petroleum production by 2030. So at the one hand, part of us are holding the light, another part of us are holding the dark, and regrettably, some Christian communities are supporting that. On the other hand, on the good side, we've got the best PR firm in the world behind us, and that PR firm is called Geophysics, because every year it's coming up with new disasters, new advertisements for climate change, if you will. So we're slowly moving to that tipping point of people saying, I've got to take it seriously. We have to take it off the back burner and put it on the front burner. We have to realize that we can't get distracted by all the social problems if this problem makes every other social problem worse. This problem will reduce the value of our money, the value of our property, the value of our natural resources, the value of our communication systems, the value and capacity of our care systems, and the value of our health systems, and the capacity to create and remedy injustice. So climate change is central and behind everything. So political truths that we might choose to belong to. The good news is that we don't have to solve the global problem. That's not our job. We just need to belong to the problem here, in this congregation, in this county, to feel it here, to worry about it here, not to be overcome by that, to make it normal to talk about it in dinner conversations, in community groups conversations, if you're out on the golf links or whatever, in a quilting society, wherever you're involved, can we normalize talking about climate, talking about anxiety, talking about, I feel hopeless. The interesting thing, I've worked with some groups there, and one of the topics was how to deal with our sense of being utterly hopeless. And the fascinating experience is that when you get 10 people together talking about hopelessness, it turns into hope. Because then it's not just your hopelessness, it's ours. And it can, what is horrific individually can be galvanizing effectively, or collectively. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to do this work. You don't have to become a scientist. You don't have to at all be an expert. We just have to bring it in. I'm not an expert. I just decided that this was my devotion. And it's really fun feeling less guilty. I'm not sure if I'm getting much done, but I do feel less guilty. As one friend told me, he says, God knows what's got to be done. I'm in it for whatever I can do. No more need be asked. Next, those of you that are over 60, you hold, I'm well over 60, 70% of the national wealth. There is a hidden capacity in our elder community to galvanize, to come together, to say that we're going to create a new retirement. We're going to retire into saving creation for all of the children on the walls and all the other children in our hearts and all the future generations. That can be done because it is being done. I was involved in helping start or move a group called Third Act that is up for 60 and over only. It's got a very strong faith community in it, but it went from 0 to 60,000 people in 16 months. So imagine if amongst all of the gray hairs and the elder folks, we have opportunities. We can meet. We can do it over the internet. There's a Washington chapter of this as well if you want to organize it. We just do it logically within the church, because the church is a beloved community, sees it as more than technical. In the church, we realize that creation care isn't just this petroleum issue, it's a care issue. It's the care for every one of us as a created. It's the care for the injustice to anyone because it's a violation of their right to be fully created. So you get to address injustice, you get to address climate, you get to address community, all in the same package. Imagine just for a moment that you're in this community a decade from now and climate change is normalized, that it's a common conversation at Thanksgiving, and we talk about it at Christmas, and we talk about it at Easter, and everything else, that it is central to our faith as our faith is presently central to us. Imagine, if you will, if you all came together and that 15 years from now, children would be studying in the county history and say, hey, it all started at St. Luke's. 15 people, maybe 20, that's all you need for critical mass, just to decide, well, we're going to do something. Don't have to do the same thing. The idea basically is that we can get there by starting with us here. So, how about some truths that we can belong to regarding faith? Our religion is surprisingly important. If we think about it historically, faith has put us over the top of almost every single huge social conflict in the US. For example, faith launched the abolition movement, and faith put us over the top. Faith launched the civil rights movement, and it put us over the top. Faith, in many ways, launched the gay rights movement, and we put it over the top. So we can do it. Right now, the only politically active, dynamic political community now is the very right-wing side of the faith that is, in many ways, extremely involved politically. And when I'm dealing with more progressive congregations, there's a reluctance to be political. And I say, well, I'm not sure Jesus did anything that wasn't political. So that's within us. And there's a big difference between being political and being partisan, because creation care has no party. Climate change has no partisanship. It just has the need for it to be done. So, next is creation care is loving one's neighbor as oneself. It's a staggering opportunity to revivify our faith, to make Christianity more relevant to our community. And it's not just human neighbors that we're loving as ourselves, it's the cedar, the salal, the elk, the salmon, as neighbors. And it's not just our neighbors now, but the neighbors in the future. All our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. It's all those neighbors on the wall, loving their capacity to have a future that might be, if we work hard, somewhat like ours. But otherwise, it's going to be far worse. And climate change isn't about creating guilt. It's about allowing it to come up, not having it be repressed, and letting it go. Because our faith has an engine of forgiveness, provided we step up and take responsibility. And it's so much fun holding less guilt. So, one of the ways to do one thing that takes maybe a half an hour so that you can be counted on a national level is found on the back of this purple sheet, if you could open it up. What this is a creation justice pledge. We all know what a pledge is. We do one every year for money. Why not do one for creation? It doesn't cost you anything. It just costs you a decision to commit yourself. So looking at point number 1, it says, I agree we have a creation emergency. I pledge to determine my carbon footprint and try to reduce it by 50%. So this is a national website for the Episcopal Church. Your congregation is there. It presently doesn't have any registrants on it, but you can take your own carbon footprint online. It takes you about a half hour, and then you're counted. You're counted locally, you're counted nationally, and it's evidence that our faith has stood up and said, we're owning this. Now, the political beauty of this is that so many countries in the world, and the US regrettably still, is not fully counting its own carbon footprint. We won't solve climate change globally until all the countries have their carbon footprint counted and say they're going to do something about it. So we start by modeling the behavior we want, right? We just do it household by household. We do it in terms of maybe this building too. And then it can spread throughout the community, because this can be done community-wide. There's many cities that have taken this. And if you do it successfully here, maybe the city could adopt the same thing. And so you have a citywide counting of carbon footprints. And the interesting happens when people know what their footprint is. Sometimes they feel guilty, sometimes they don't, but almost everybody feels better because they've taken a stand. They've owned how they are in the world. And this thing is tied to all these ways in which you can reduce your carbon footprint. It doesn't make you have to pay $5,000 or $10,000 for solar panels or anything like that. It's just allowing yourself to be educated and in a way opening your heart to the heart of creation, because once this sort of thing happens, then other people will come to you saying, hey, I feel that way. Wow. And new friendships are possible. Looking at number 2, that regards the congregation as a whole. Number 3 is pledging to educate yourself. It's the climate reality program that Al Gore does. And I did speak with him and his group, and they're willing to train people from this congregation for free. And it's a 72-hour program. You can take it online, and it's really fun to go through it with 5 or 6 friends, and you'll leave it with thousands of slides and the latest in information, such that you can simply normalize climate conversations here. And the world wants to hear about here. The world's looking at us to say, when is America going to stand up and admit as a large group that this is normal? And so we have some really interesting opportunities here. Moving down, there's pledging to support youth and other climate activists. It's quite possible for every congregation to just simply advertise that they'll support youth climate activity. Imagine the number of youth you would draw here if you did this county-wide. That St. Luke's is sponsoring youth to do important climate activism work. It could be a contest every year. I'm doing something like that with another congregation. You get more members, get more involvement, and more importantly, youth look to elders to advise them on how to move forward. If they want to be political, they can be much more successful if there's 15 or 20 gray hairs like me standing around with them when they make their appeal. We can empower them because they're going to carry the ball after us. So, in essence, this pledge allows us to do what nations should do. And that way we set an example, a faith example. Each point's optional. You don't have to do all 9. You don't have to guarantee that you're going to reduce your carbon footprint by 50% by 2030. That's the Paris Accords. You just have to try. That's all. And in learning and the trying, it becomes easier to see what we have to do as a community. What we do individually, we have to start to do collectively. So many folks insist that it's too late, it's too big, it's too depressing to get involved, but I'd like to suggest otherwise. I think our Bible tells us that only when we leave Pharaoh does water spring from what was rock. Amen.